Well, I'm drained already after talking to you people for a couple of days about this subject. I'm absolutely shocked, and I feel degraded too as a member of the human race. Tom, can you first give a case history? Just kind of a typical case history, and then we'll talk in greater detail about what happens.
All right, I can tell you the biography of a little kid from a hollow in West Virginia whose mom and dad went to Houston to find work. They thought that Houston was the capital of opportunity in America. The dad went out there to get a job, a low-level job with an oil company, brought the mother, then sent for little Jimmy and his little brother. Jimmy and his brother got to Houston on a Greyhound bus, and his dad and mom failed to pick him up.
How old were they?
Jimmy at that time was 12 and his little brother was 6. They spent the night in the terminal, Jimmy fending off the advances of a number of men. And then the dad came to pick him up the next morning. The parents had both gotten drunk and forgotten to pick up the kids. The boys went to live with their parents. The parents both had severe drinking problems. The dad lost his job. The mother got killed in a car wreck. The little boy was severely injured. Jimmy dropped out of school to try to hustle, was his word, money to help keep the family, what was left of it, together. The dad died, choking in his own vomit after a drinking bout. And Jimmy was the sole support of himself and his little brother. The rent was coming round, and Jimmy had no money, and then a neighbor kid said to him, "You can get $10 just for watching me play with a man." And Jimmy said, "That's queer." And his friend said, "It's not queer if the guy does it to you. If you just let it happen, and all you have to do is watch." Jimmy did it. Then the man offered Jimmy $25 to let the man play with Jimmy. And Jimmy took it, so he had $35. And then he got introduced into the routine. Jimmy was little, only 12, and he was small for his age. And the circuit he went on in Houston was not the main one, which is Montrose. He went to a place nearby, an arcade called Funland. The way that worked was the boys would stand by the machines, and a man would come by. If the man offered quarters, the boy would take them, and then the man and the boy would go off. Jimmy became a professional prostitute at the age of 12.
Father, educator, activist, political organizer, and child advocate. Tom Philpott, in the 80s and early 90s, exposed elite child ST happening in major cities in Texas like Houston and Austin. Tom went on to expose similar occurrences happening all throughout the U.S. Tom Philpott's work lives on today because he exposed the early makings of what child ST in America has now become. During his investigative research, Tom spoke with numerous runaway boys living on the inner city streets of Texas, selling themselves to PDFiles and working for call boy rings. Some of these boys were younger than 8 years old. Discovering this societal truth rocked Tom's world. Not only did he work to expose the matter, but he tried to help the boys living on the streets. He was stunned by the sheer amount of them, the age ranges, and the trauma that these boys were enduring on a daily basis, just so they would have somewhere to sleep and something to eat. Unfortunately, Tom Philpott faced public scrutiny while also putting his life in severe danger. Welcome back, sleepyheads. Through the 1970s through the 1990s, before Jeffrey Epstein came to the level of power and notoriety and wealth that he had gained, there were many others just like him. Some were even worse than him. And they too destroy the lives of innocents while gaining wealth, power, and notoriety. Now, despite the lack of technology and resources that we have today, There were many brave souls who sacrificed their lives to expose elite child ST happening in America. This is the story of truth teller Thomas Lee Philpott. Thomas Philpott grew up in a segregated Chicago beginning in the late 1940s. He was raised by his mother and Irish immigrant grandparents. From an early age, Tom was aware of the racial and social disparities occurring within his community. Tom's activism roots solidified in high school when he purchased Martin Luther King Jr.'s A Stride Towards Freedom. After that, Tom knew what kind of mark he wanted to leave in the world. As a teen, Tom participated in a wade-in to desegregate his local beach. He also participated in demonstrations against segregated merchants. During his undergraduate education years, Tom helped organize a boycott to desegregate the campus pools at Loyola University, where he also earned his bachelor's degree in history. Tom married his first wife, Anne, in 1963. The two lived in an integrated apartment building in Chicago. His neighbor was comedian and activist Dick Gregory. In 1966, Tom marched with MLK for fair housing in Chicago. Tom went on to pursue his doctorate studies in history at Chicago University. Within 4 years of marriage, Tom and Anne had 2 boys and a girl. To take care of his family and complete his doctorate studies, Tom worked 3 jobs. In 1969, Tom finished his coursework for his PhD, despite not having completed his dissertation. Tom went on to accept an instructor position at the University of Texas. Later in years, during the interview, Tom's first wife, Anne, described their drive out to Texas as awful, unknowingly foreshadowing events that would change her family's life forever. Tom's career as an activist conflicted with his career as a professor, straining his family life and mental health. This only added to the controversy of his decision to join the Defense Against Child ST. Tom and Anne wanted to raise their family in a mixed-race neighborhood. Since they couldn't find one, they theorized that a neighborhood in northeast Austin would be more likely to integrate and diversify. Tom and Anne were correct. As Tom and Anne embraced their black neighbors, white neighbors harassed Tom and Anne and vandalized their property. At work, Tom quickly gained the reputation of being outspoken and eccentric. He was liked just as much as he was disliked. In fact, in a student poll, he was named amongst both the 20 best and 20 worst professors at the University of Texas. People characterized Tom as vocal and left-turning. His most popular course was titled The American Experience. At its peak, the course drew in more than 800 students per semester. Outside of work, Tom continued his activism within his community. He testified before his city council in favor of desegregated schools. He helped found the Northeast Austin Democrats and was a 3-time delegate at the state Democratic Convention. Tom spoke up for those who couldn't. He had an impulse to face injustice head-on. Once, during a lecture, Tom explained to his students that those who work outside of popular opinion seek to expand the limits of public tolerance. He continued by saying, "Those men are reformers after they're dead, but while they're alive, they're called agitators." After being given an ultimatum to complete his dissertation or lose his job, Tom completed his dissertation in 1974. His dissertation was titled Slum in the Ghetto, Neighborhood Deterioration, Middle-Class Reform, Chicago, 1880 through 1930. That same year, Tom accepted a tenure-track position as an associate professor at the University of Texas. In 1975, Former University of Texas President Lorraine Rogers invited McGeorge Bundy to speak at a UT graduation ceremony. Bundy, an academic and national security advisor, was known for being a key personnel whose decisions led to the increased conflict and disastrous conditions of the Vietnam War. Tom, along with another professor, walked out of the graduation ceremony. That summer, Tom's department recommended a $2,000 raise, but Lorraine Rogers only approved $900. The other professor who walked out with Tom also received a raise cut, along with 5 other politically active professors. Together, they filed a class action lawsuit against the University of Texas for pursuing a course of conduct designed to curtail freedom of expression. It would be another 4 years before a federal judge ruled against the professors. Following the filing of the lawsuit, Tom spoke at a student-led rally for those who opposed the reappointment of Lorraine Rogers as University of Texas president. Due to the constant social injustice battles and Tom's struggle with his manic depressive disorder, Tom and Anne separated from Thanksgiving of 1975 to June of 1976. In early 1977, Tom challenged businessman, rancher, and Texas Governor Dolph Briscoe's appointment of 3 newly elected Board of Regents. Each were seen as Briscoe's lackeys. One of Briscoe's appointees was his own personal physician. Tom started a petition and did everything he could to block the confirmation of Briscoe's appointed board members. Despite Tom's exhaustive efforts to counter the appointments and rally opposing force, the Senate confirmed the new appointments. That year, Tom was hospitalized for his manic depression. While it took some time, and despite that setback, Tom fought to reground himself. Unfortunately, this involved Tom doing the most cliché thing a male professor could do. He fell in love with his female student named Louise Epstein. Anne made Tom choose between her and the kids or Louise. Tom didn't know what to do, and he attempted self-deletion by overdosing on his lithium medication. Tom's oldest son, Tom Jr., and Louise got him to the hospital in time to save him. Tom ended up moving in with Louise in 1978. He and Anne divorced in May of that year. Louise and Tom married in October of that year. And some would think the wild journey of being an institutional disruptor and a fractured family man would have slowed things down for Tom, but a somber yet impactful period of his life was about to begin. It was in 1979 when Tom met students and reporters John Kells and David Glott. They invited Philpott to a private screening of their documentary, Boys for Sale. Boys for Sale was a controversial documentary that exposed the rising issues of child ST in Houston, Texas, which is also, of course, the largest city in Texas. This event sent Tom's already turbulent life down a disturbing and dark path.
The subject of Alternative Views news magazine for the evening is boy prostitution, the widespread use and abuse of male children for sexual purposes. Some of the language in the program may be offensive to some people. Admittedly, the whole subject is offensive.
In 1979, there was a call boy ring operated out of New York City, which had phone hookups with Houston, Atlanta, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Washington, D.C. And that call boy ring had a list of 10,000 clients who could call and with a credit card purchase a boy. Hello?
Hello, this is credit card number 06789. I'd like to make an order, please.
Go ahead.
I'm looking for a young male, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Body hair or no body hair?
Thick body hair, please.
What age?
10 to 12.
Butch or femme?
Butch, please.
What is your address?
I'm at the Houston Marriott Hotel, room 313.
Wire me $200 now by credit card and have $100 in cash for the boy. He'll be there in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
In Houston, I give the figure based on, I think, prudent calculations that upwards of 350 boys a year are killed deliberately because of this. Many more die of drug overuse, malnutrition, of suicide. The national toll per year is in the thousands every year. Kids die violently because of this. It's closely attached to the major financial, commercial, industrial, educational institutions of our society. It's run by the same people who run those. It's frequented by the same people who occupy management positions in those. It's not the mafia. It's an adjunct of clean business. It's serving the most respectable people we have in our society, the people who are the elite.
After Tom saw Boys for Sale, he shelved the book that he was writing on radical Irish American coal miners. Instead, he felt the urge to research and write about the epidemic of boys selling themselves to PDFiles, not only in Texas, but on the national status of the issue as well. Tom worked with John and David to expand on their research. The trio went on to team up with Daily Texan editor Gary Felder and reporter Mark McKinnon. Felder and McKinnon had both previously published stories on essay crimes against children. Tom began his research by observing the boy hustlers and their everyday lives. He observed the operations of how the men would come, these PDF files, and how they went about purchasing what was called boy hustlers at the time. Tom conducted interviews with the boy hustlers. He learned when and how these boys began selling their bodies to PDF files. Tom was shocked by the social status that some of the PDF files had. These men were often in hetero, nuclear families. Many were businessmen, political officials, and public figures. These men would hang out near arcades to solicit services from the boys or use the callboy rings. The boys and the men had literal hand and verbal code signals to initiate sexual services. The men would often drive around the areas where the boy hustlers would hang out. They would flash those hand signals, and the boys would get in the car with the men. Some would return within an hour, some days or weeks, and some never returned. The boy hustlers would look out for each other. They had their own signals for men who they believed were sadistic or just dangerous overall. But not all of the men were violent. Some were leagues beyond that. Some were flat-out sadists to the core. Tom discovered that many of these boy hustlers would end up beaten, tortured, starved, or deleted. Texas police departments were well aware of these boy hustlers selling themselves to PDF files. They turned a blind eye and would often misclassify blatant homicide cases when these boys' bodies would be discarded in dumpsters or ditches with obvious signs of foul play. These boy hustlers wound up on the streets to escape crimes happening within their own homes, severe neglect, or they were kicked out. Some of these boys used the money they made selling themselves to help out their families. Tom tried to help the boys find legal work and gain social resources, but Tom would discover the cycle he was trying to break was so much bigger than him. On October 14th of 1981, Alternative Views, a Texas public broadcasting show, aired part 1 of Tom along with his co-investigator and former editor of the Daily Texan, Mark McKinnon, discussing their research on child ST in Houston. Some of the interview clips from the Boys for Sale documentary were shown. The broadcast created more press exposure for Tom, making him even more vulnerable. It wasn't long after Tom began investigating the boy hustlers in Houston when his life, his family's, and his co-investigators came under threat. Tom believed the wealthy men who purchased and profited from the boy hustlers wanting to take him out. Tom's phone was bugged and his apartment was repeatedly broken into. One day when Tom was driving down a freeway, a passenger in another car pointed a rifle at him. Tom's co-investigators reported being shot at, and they even hired bodyguards. Tom and Louise were in constant fear for their lives. Louise was so afraid that she would often lie in bed at night shaking. In 1981, she moved out and filed for divorce. A short time later, just a couple of weeks after that public broadcasting and Tom discussing the boy hustlers and the PDF rings happening in Texas, on October 27th of 1981, between 7 and 8 p.m., Tom alleged that two men broke into his home. Tom at the time was in the kitchen eating and could hear someone in his bedroom where Tom kept his pistol on a shelf. Tom believed the intruders had previously broken into his house and knew exactly where to find his gun. As Tom alleges, he goes back to check on the noise. He opens his bedroom door, reaching to turn on the light switch. Before he can turn on the light, someone grabs him. Two men quickly begin trying to restrain Tom. The struggle moved over to the bedroom window. Tom hit his head against the window, breaking a couple of glass window panes. That's when Tom realized the perps had his .38 caliber gun. The perps forced Tom towards his bed, and Tom didn't remember even being shot, but he remembered the sound of the gun being fired. The bullet, thankfully, passed through Tom's shoulder and lodged into the wall above his headboard. Tom passed out, and at some point the intruders fled. In a pure state of fate, the phone rang, triggering Tom to regain consciousness. It was Louise calling. Tom told her he'd been shot. Louise rushed to him and hurried him to the hospital. Along the drive there, Louise flagged down a police car. That was the first time police had been notified about the attack. Tom at that point was certain the Houston PDFile rings were out to get him. He believed they knew about his previous self-deletion attempt and were determined to make it seem like he had self-deleted. In a later interview, Tom said that he made mortal enemies because of his boy hustler and PDFile research. Despite Tom's accounts of events, the police didn't buy his story. The police couldn't find any sign of forced entry, which Tom explained his home had been previously broken into with no signs of forced entry. Also, Tom believed the perpetrators entered his house through his unlocked bedroom window. Furthermore, the police found no fingerprints and no physical evidence to back Tom's claims. Tom also told the police that one shot was fired, but they found two bullet shell casings. The police also thought it was suspicious that Tom didn't call the police when he awoke. The police asked Tom to do a lie detector test, but Tom refused. Tom believed the detector test administered to manic depressives were unreliable. The police then concluded and spread the narrative that Tom shot himself for publicity, sympathy, or a domestic quarrel had occurred. Tom didn't let the gaslighting get to him. Soon after his attack, he discovered that 53-year-old Northern Illinois sociology professor James Butry, who was also researching boy hustlers, was shot and deleted. Tom did not know this man. He was shocked to learn that another professor, also in America, was researching the same issue that he was. And that professor may have been going through the same threats that Tom believed he was experiencing. Word spread through Texas news about Tom being shot. The press labeled Tom as an anti-corn crusader who was shot in his home. This led to Tom's reputation becoming more infamous, and thanks to the police not believing him, some questioned Tom's character, motives, and sanity. Consider the newspaper headline, "Anti-Corn Crusader Shot by Intruders." Anti-corn, not child slave crusader or child welfare crusader or anti-PDF crusader. The press called him an anti-corn crusader. Remember, this is the 1980s. People trusted and read their newspapers every day. They took news narratives to heart. Shifting and programming a single narrative was all too easy back then. Well, some would say it's still pretty easy today as well. A couple of articles could have thousands labeling Tom Philpott as an attention-seeking basket case. But like I said, Tom never stopped, and he didn't let that bad press or the beliefs of others thwart his mission to help the children, selling themselves to high-profile PDF files on the streets. On November 8th of 1981, Alternative Views aired part 2 of the interview Tom and Mark McKinnon did. On November 22nd of 1981, Tom went on Good Morning Austin to discuss his Boys for Sale research. In May of 1982, an article by journalist Victoria Lowe was published in Texas Monthly. Lowe's article is the most extensive piece ever written about Tom Philpott. Tom opened up to Lowe about his childhood, the attempt on his life, and his career at the University of Texas. During their interview, Tom told Lowe that he was expecting an attack and that he had made mortal enemies by investigating PDFiles and organized child ST. Tom and Louise would go on to reconcile their marriage, but would later divorce. And there are some gaps in Tom's story from 1982 to 1994 that just aren't clear due to his story not being well documented. What I know for sure is that Tom never stopped researching child ST. In fact, Tom began teaching a seminar at the University of Texas titled Children and the City Streets. The dark road that Tom stumbled into, like so many of us around the world have been unraveling through our own research, showed him truths in his everyday life that he could not ignore. When someone develops the awareness of child ST, one may start to see signs of it in their everyday life. Perhaps this is what led to Tom's arrest on January 28th of 1985. On a Monday morning, 43 years old at the time, Philpott was sure of his suspicion that his neighbors were harming their 2 children. Tom called the police to inform them of the situation. He then took his loaded .32 caliber gun, knocked on his neighbor's door, and announced he was a police officer. Tom's neighbor reported that he flashed something gold, leading her to believe that Tom was an actual police officer. Tom ordered the woman and the 2 children to exit the apartment. One can only assume he wanted to be sure the children were safe until the police arrived. The events from when Tom, his neighbor, and the children were all outside aren't clear. What is clear from public records is that Tom was arrested shortly after the police arrived for unlawfully carrying a weapon and impersonating a police officer. Ultimately, the weapons charge was dropped. However, Tom still faced repercussions for impersonating a police officer. During his arraignment, Tom was released on bail, which was set at $500. Based on the records I can find, there was no mention of an investigation into Tom's claims about his neighbors. But those records would not likely be released due to the protection of the children. One paper stated that no one was arrested for child crimes. Sadly, I cannot verify how things played out for Tom, but I know he didn't go to jail. I'm assuming the impersonation charges were dropped, considering that Tom was acting in an effort to save the children he believed were being harmed. I also cannot verify how the University of Texas administration responded to the arrest or the events that followed. It was a different time, and thankfully Tom was tenured. What is clear, though, from the way Tom was portrayed in the papers, he most likely faced ridicule and lost some credibility with the public, possibly more credibility than he had initially lost after the alleged attempt on his life.
Well, there was some
The
ring.
charges were dropped.
Well, what was the story about the young boys being tour guides for the Capitol? And this was also part of a little boy sex ring, and also some of it resulted in campaign contributions. I read that in an article.
That has to do with the state of Texas, as a matter of fact.
Texas.
And Here's the way we can tell that story.
This is one you can't tell.
Well, this is one we can. It got into the newspaper.
Yeah, I saw it in the newspaper.
But then it disappeared.
Oh.
What appeared in the newspaper was a boys' home run by a Texas state representative was being investigated for charge of abuse of the boys. The state representative said that there was no abuse. He claimed that his place could not be investigated by the state because it was private, like that of
Lester
Reverend Roloff. The story died and didn't appear in the press anymore. The lead that produced the initial story was that representative took campaign contributions, and then the contributors, as a reward, got to have sex with the boys in the home. And that he did this for more than himself, but for other representatives. That man is out of the state legislature.
So we've talked about legislators, congressmen,
A senator.
senators, people in the highest ranks of government at the state level. Now, are these just aberrations, or is this part of a widespread ongoing thing?
I think it's very widespread. And not just among powerful politicians. We've talked about politicians. But it seems to be the case that in all high-powered professions,
Corporations now we're talking about too.
corporations, medicine, law, even the university, not necessarily professions with bloated salaries, but prestige, some power, influence, and above all, pressure. The men involved are susceptible to this kind of deviation.
On October 9th, 1991, police were called to Philpott's home. His girlfriend at the time, Judy White, discovered Tom's lifeless body around 7 p.m. Philpott was sitting on a couch on the back porch, upright with his head resting against the back exterior of the house. Judy said she walked into different rooms looking for Tom before hearing a thud coming from the back porch. She arrived at the house with groceries for her and Tom's dinner. The last time she'd seen Tom that day was around 12:30 to 1 p.m. Tom was supposed to teach later that afternoon. 3 different police officers arrived on the scene and wrote reports about what they saw upon their arrival. Here are some details about what they observed. Police estimated, based on the arrival time, that Tom had been lifeless for a couple of hours. There was a bullet puncture wound on Tom's chest, which is an interesting place for a person to decide to delete themselves by gun. In fact, if someone self-deletes using an automatic weapon, in most cases the entry wound would be found on the head. While there are documented cases, it is less common for a self-deletion entry wound by gun to be found on the chest region. 3 officers reported on their observations from the scene. What was described as an orange towel by one officer and red by another officer was observed to be wrapped around Tom's left hand. The towel had a bullet hole on it and gunpowder around it. Tom's right hand was resting on the couch next to his thigh. Directly underneath his right shoe was Tom's black .32 caliber pistol. There was no expansion in the police report as to why the gun would be underneath Philpott's right shoe. There was also an empty, overturned glass on Tom's left side. There was no reported information as to the contents of what was in the glass. Philpott's neighbor, Todd Mays, said he heard a female cry out, "Oh, don't, stop," but he couldn't see anyone from his bedroom window. Mays said he never heard the gunshot or a loud pop. Police officers on the scene noted in their reports that Philpott had 3 desks in his home and the drawers on each desk were slightly open. Police officers found 3 checks Tom had written out. One was for Judy White in the amount of $1,200. The other 2 were for Tom's daughter Sarah and his son Tom Jr., both in the amount of $1,000. Police found what was possibly a self-deletion note, but the contents of that note were never revealed in any of the police reports. When Tom Jr. and Judy were questioned, they disclosed to officers about Tom's battle with manic depression and the previous attempt that he had made on his own life. Tom Jr. went on to tell a police officer that his father had attempted to delete himself once by overdose and another time in 1981. Tom Jr. told the police that in 1981, Philpott attempted to stage his deletion and make it look like a crime. Tom Jr. was of course referring to that break-in that led to Philpott being shot. That blew me away reading that in the police report, because Tom Philpott reported to police and to Victoria Lowe in their interview that he was attacked and that intruders tried to make it look like a self-deletion. Yet Tom Jr. told the police that it was his second attempt on his own life. This depicts an entirely different perspective of Tom Philpott. Tom Jr. also disclosed to police officers that his father had come off a manic depressive episode in March of 1991. Tom Jr. said his father appeared to be depressed, but his depression seemed stable. Tom Jr. further disclosed that his father's self-deletion attempts were made when he would stop taking his medication. When Judy White disclosed Philpott's mental health struggles to the police, she said that Philpott was taking Tegretol. Self-deletion thoughts are a common side effect of Tegretol. Judy White also disclosed to the police officers that Tom had spoken about self-deletion a couple of days prior. Once police had an understanding of Philpott's mental health struggles, their minds were made up. Now, despite those disclosures, I still think about the fact that his neighbor, Tom Mays, heard a woman shout, "Oh, stop, don't." Also, he didn't hear any shot being fired. Clearly, that red or orange towel was used to muffle the sound of the gunshot. But the thickness of the towel and its capability to properly muffle aren't certain and were not made clear in the police reports. The fact that Tom wrote checks out to his children and Judy was also interesting. It isn't known as to whether or not those checks were the entirety of his bank accounts. And think about all the drawers in his desk, his 3 desks that were all open. Someone was looking for something, right? And then there's that possible self-deletion note. For police officers to call it a possible self-deletion note adds even more confusion. What about it made them believe that it was one in the first place, and why would they label it as possible? I also have to add that despite Tom working on a book to expose PDFiles and child ST, there was no mention of a manuscript or anything in his police reports. There was no mention of Tom Philpott being that anti-corn crusader. Despite Judy and Tom Jr. mentioning his manic depression, him discussing wanting to self-delete 2 days prior, and the previous attempts that Tom had made on his life, they never said that Tom was involved in very high-profile investigations concerning child ST and PDF rings in Texas. And whatever happened to that manuscript that Tom was writing to expose all of that? Tom started working on that book in 1982. By 1985, he was teaching a course on the subject matter. You would think that he would have something put together, something that could have been located on one of those 3 desks. I found it strange that neither Judy or Tom Jr. would even mention that Tom researched child ST in Texas and all the public attention that he had gained from it. How politically active Tom was. How he opposed some of the most powerful, wealthiest people in Texas to protect civil rights and free expression and education. Remember James Budry, that Illinois professor who was researching child ST, and he was deleted by an automatic weapon? That establishes the beginning threads of a possible pattern. Furthermore, in most cases of people investigating child ST in the 70s through the early 90s, it was considered extremely dangerous. Child ST wasn't something that society was truly acknowledging or really discussing. Some would say that this hasn't been truly acknowledged or discussed until the 2020s. So just think about how easy it was for perpetrators to get away with deleting these exposers and investigators. I reached out to Tom Jr., who now works as a journalist. I think he's a senior level journalist. And I asked him if he'd be willing to speak with me or give some response regarding his father. And I did this very respectfully, of course, and not much to my surprise, but I never heard back. But I wanted to at least try, because what Tom Jr. revealed to the police in 1991 was so unsettling to the narrative that Tom Philpott had built surrounding the danger and threats that he was facing in his life because he was speaking up about child ST and PDFiles. Tom Philpott's ruled self-deletion is just as much a mystery as that 1981 intruder incident. Despite this confusion and unfortunate reality of facts, Tom Philpott was a dedicated activist, educator, and leader. To me, he will always be among the first class of truth tellers in the 1980s to go public about his knowledge of child ST in America. So regardless of his ending, I believe Tom Philpott to be a hero and a truth teller. Sleepyheads, this concludes the first truth teller segment of the proliferation child ST in America. Let me know what you think in the comments, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for listening all the way through. Have a good night, Sleepyheads.